Have you been wanting to learn how to knit? Or are you maybe a beginner knitter but getting really frustrated on terminology or fitting or even what tools to have? Stick around because I'm going to be talking about all of those things. Hello and welcome to Killer Kitsch Lizzie, my weird little world where I like to knit and sew and do other crafty things. As the intro told you, this video is going to be about basic knitting. I've actually had quite a few people recently message me, especially when I'm doing a video about knitting updates, saying that they are either brand new knitters or they've been knitting for a while, but they don't feel that they are achieving the quality that they want for for the finished product. And they have actually asked me if I could do some knitting tutorials. Also on top of that, I did a survey a few months back anyway, asking what kind of content you wanted, and knitting and knitting tutorials and tutorials in general were definitely at the top of the list. So I am actually going to be doing, over the next little while, some odds and ends of knitting tutorials. It's February, which by the way I'm over. So we're going to be getting into the summer months in a few months, and people will be less wanting knitting. So I'm going to do some videos right now in the next month or two about knitting tips and tricks, some tutorials, like mini tutorials, and then probably in the fall and winter I'll do a bunch more. But I thought I would do a couple right now because there are people that are knitting still. I mean, it is really cold out here in Toronto and a lot of people are knitting. I'm sure in other countries where it's winter right now, people are still knitting. So I hope this helps you. I myself have been, just a background, I've talked about this many times, but in case you have not heard it, I've been knitting since I was 10. I basically knit all year long. Even in the summertime, I will sit beside the air conditioner and knit. I have a closet full of handmade knit garments and accessories, like this beret, like this bolero, like what Bunty is wearing. And for me, when people say, oh, knitting is so hard, I can't get it, in my head, I'm like, no, it's not. It's really easy. I always forget that, I've also been knitting since I was 10 years old, and for the most part, unless I'm doing very complicated lace or something where I have to be looking at my work, I can not look at my work when I'm knitting. I'm at that point in my knitting life, but not everyone is, and I have to remember that. So what I thought I would do in this video particularly is, and using Bunty for part of it, I'm going to talk about a little bit of fit information. It's not going to be too entailed. It's going to be basic fit stuff that you should be doing as you're knitting. I'm also just going to quickly talk about some knitting tools when you're starting out that are good to have. These are, in my opinion, necessary things. And I'm also just going to be talking a little bit about, I have a pile of knits in front of me that are different styles and different techniques used. So I just want to briefly talk about some of the different techniques for knitting a garment. And then, maybe some point in the future, I'll get more in depth in one of them or a couple of them or something like that. But yeah, for now, we're going to do basics. And I'm going to have a few very quick little tutorials pop up throughout this video for a few different of the knitting basics that you will need to learn if you're just starting out, or maybe you're trying to do them, because I had one person say they didn't understand how to cast on properly or cast off properly. There are a bunch of different ways to do both of those things. These are both the ones I'm going to show, the little tutorial I'm going to show. They're going to be very basic anyone could use it for any garment type, cast on, cast off. And then there'll be a few other things. Before I show you the sweaters, I am just going to quickly show you the basic knitting things that I have aside from knitting needles. Now, talking about knitting needles, I do have straight and circulars. I personally tend to use circulars more than straight needles. And the reason for that, and there might be other people that have this problem too, I do find that straight needles actually hurt my hands. It's the way I was taught to knit. They tend to, hurt my hand. Like they physically, literally hurt my hand. And I have tried to figure out I've tried different styles of knitting because there's British style, there's UK style, there's Portuguese style. Like there's a whole bunch of different styles for holding your needles. And the one I use is the throw, where you throw the yarn, as opposed to and now I've forgotten which is which. English style is, you know what? I can't remember right now. If I can find an illustration showing the difference, I'll pop it in. I can never remember which is English and which is continental. When I'm thinking about it in my head, as soon as I see it, I'm like, okay, that's what it is. But I will if I find an illustration, I'll put it in. But back to my basics. So aside from knitting needles and of course yarn, I have a bunch of things that I always have in my knitting bag. One of the handiest ones for me are stitch markers. Whoops. As I'm trying to open it, it's like falling apart. I need a new bag. I went on, I think it was Etsy, and I bought a bag. I think it was like 100, probably not anymore because I do tend to lose them, but this originally was 100 stitch markers, which to some people might sound a bit extreme. For me, it is not, because I use these for a bunch of things. Not only to, as you're going to see on Bunty, mark buttonholes when I'm casting on, so that I don't have to keep counting, or if I'm casting on a lot of stitches, like a couple hundred stitches for a garment, when you have to go back and count that, and I don't know if this is just me or anyone else, but I will sometimes lose track as I'm getting to the end. Like someone will interrupt me, or I'll get distracted, and I might be at 180, and I'll be like, oh, was that 180 or was that 190? So what I do personally is, as I'm casting on for a garment, I will put a stitch marker at the 20 stitch mark all the way along. So I'll go 20, 40, 60, and then that way I know that I have cast on X amount of number of stitches. And you could do it for other things. You could, if you are doing lace work, you could put a stitch marker in your different sections as you're going. You could buttonholes, you can, I've dropped stitches before, and I will just put a stitch marker in to hold that stitch until I can go back and fix it. A number of really good uses for these. Now, there is a bunch of different stitch markers. I'm not going to get into them, but I do prefer the plastic ones. I have some metal ones too, but these are a little bit bigger. I find the metal ones are small, and if I'm using bigger needles, these fit on the needle still. So there's that. I highly recommend that you have a variety of... Now, when you're first getting needles, you might only buy straight needles. Also get a few basic size circulars, like anywhere from a 3mm up to a 5, just so you have them. I mean, some projects are going to need smaller, some are going to need bigger, but just have a few basic sizes and circular as well. DPNs, double pointed needles. I not only use them for knitting in the round, I will sometimes use these to hold stitches and put the little rubber tips on either end to hold the stitches in place if it's not a lot of stitches. I've also used these if I can't find my cable needle. When I'm cabling, I will use these to do cabling as well. And again, basic sizes. Like these are 4mm US 6. You know, just have, again, some of the basic sizes that you're using regularly. I would think, and I'm not sure, when you are first knitting, you're probably using fairly big needles, like anywhere between 3 to 5, and like a heavier wool like worsted. I know when I first started, when my grandma taught me, that's what I was using. Easier on your hands, the stitches are bigger, things like that. I also keep, and you don't have to have this many, but when I am drafting a knitting pattern or I have a brand new knitting pattern, I will mark it up ahead of time with highlighters. So I always have a bunch of highlighters. I have a bunch of different colored pens, and I always have Sharpies. This is how I make my notes when I'm knitting. I should have brought one of my patterns with me to show you how crazy it looks after I mark it up. But if I have a knitting pattern that has multiple sizes, some vintage patterns don't, but more modern patterns do, I will go through the entire pattern and mark off my size and any important notes with a highlighter. I honestly recommend that you at least minimally have a highlighter. I also keep a scratch pad, so if I'm doing repeats of a row, or if I'm like decreasing or lace work, I keep a scratch pad and I mark how many rows I've knit. You can also buy it's a little thing that fits on your knitting needle that you can count your stitches with that too. I don't like those. I also find that they only fit on certain sizes. I believe there are ones now where you can clip it onto the knitting needle or even yourself, and I think there's ones that you put on your finger like a ring and you mark your stitches or your rows, sorry, not stitches and rows with those. I don't have them. I don't use them. I'm telling you, pen and paper work perfectly fine for me, and there's always a pen around and there's always paper around. So it's not an additional cost. Always have measuring tape. You are going to want to constantly, and this is part of the fit, you're going to want to constantly check your fit as you go, as well as even before you start knitting. You're going to want to measure yourself to know what size knitting pattern you're going to be using. So measuring tape, very important. And then the two last things that I always have around, and the second one, some people are gonna disagree with me. I always have a variety of crochet hooks. I bought this kit again. It was on Etsy and it was like not like really inexpensive. And I have sizes from like I think 0.8 millimeter all the way up to 6.5 millimeter. There's a few missing from here just because I'm using them. But I always have a variety of crochet hooks because if you are knitting and you drop a stitch, or if you are a few rows up and you see that you messed up a stitch a few rows back, you can either pick up the stitch you dropped or let your stitch fall down to the place you need to fix, and you can use a crochet hook to pick it back up again. So always, again, you don't have to get a full range. You can get the basic sizes that you're working with. Now, many years ago, I saw somebody talk about this, and then I bought myself one, and I've been using this thing it was probably 15 years ago I bought this now. Bits of it are missing. I need to replace a few things, but you can buy these on eBay, Etsy, you name it online. It's a little box of knitting stuff. Now, I have a few additional things in here, like these are for making pom-poms, but most of these come with a variety of metal and plastic stitch holders. They usually come with snips. And also the little round stitch markers. They come with a few of the little rubber tips for the end. They usually come with a couple of, I'm missing one actually. There was 3 stitch holders in here. They also come with a seam ripper and a couple of different sizes of darning needles or yarn needles, and a couple of different sizes of cable hooks. And I use this stuff all the time. I know there are a few knitters out there who have channels who actually poo-poo this. They say it's not worth it. They are literally a couple of, I think this was $5. I don't know what it is now, like Canadian. It could be $10 or $12 now, I don't know, but it is actually less expensive than buying all of these pieces individually. And over time you will, I bought a big bag of stitch markers because I've lost all of the ones that were in here. Or I needed more. And I bought this kit many times for friends. Oh, just as sort of a warning, a lot of these come with a measuring tape. Throw that measuring tape, I still have mine, just get rid of it. I compared this to my other measuring tape as well as a ruler, and it's off, and usually the ones that come in these kits are not accurate. So just when you do buy this, just get rid of the tape and then you have more room for other things in here. But those are handy, especially if you just start knitting. Okay, so those are the basic tools, and I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit about fit, and I am then going to have a few little tutorials on how to use like the crochet hook to pull up your stitches, and then I'm going to do basic things like how to do a knit stitch, stockinette stitch, a purl stitch, how to increase, how to decrease, how to cast on and cast off. Yeah, I think those are the basic things I'm going to cover. So, using Bunty here, as I am knitting, these are the things I constantly check. Now, this pattern is a bottom up, and now I'll show you the sweaters in a minute. This is a bottom up pattern that when I got to the armhole area, I then had to split it and then knit the front and back separately. The sleeves were knit separately and set in, and the button band was, please excuse my voice, and the button band was also knit separately, and then using a flat seam, knit on. As I was knitting this particular garment, because it was bottom up, seamless bottom up, as I was knitting the sleeve, which was from bottom up, I knit the wrist, and then I wrapped it around my wrist. Then I knit about 6 inches, and then I wrapped it around to make sure the seams met. Also, with allowance for, again, I apologize for my voice, with allowance for seaming it up, which is not a lot, and then I did the same every 5 or 6 inches until I got to the armhole. And then as I was knitting, so I knit this part first. So just going to come back to this for a second. The armsicle. In vintage, this is a vintage pattern. In vintage pattern, the depth from here all the way up to here, or the measurement from here to here, in a lot of cases is shorter. And a lot of us are taller now. I know I am. I'm 5'8". I had to do a bunch of things. I had to lengthen the body slightly, just ever so slightly, like maybe an inch, because I did want it to sit on my waist. Definitely armsicle, I had to make it longer. I think I'm positive I added like an inch and a half, because from here to here, if I hadn't done that, it would have been too short, and I would not have been happy after I stitched it all up. Another reason to keep trying it on. So I will constantly try my garment on as I'm knitting. And I'm glad I did, because when I got up to under my arm, I realized it was going to be ever so slightly short in the body. And as I was knitting the armsicle, as I just mentioned, I realized it was going to be too short. I also, though I didn't have to add stitches, I don't like things tight around my neck. So I did, after I finished and cast off, I measured around here to make sure it was going to be wide enough. Which, if it was not going to be, I would have had to have come down a bit to fix that error. And what else can I tell you about fitting? I don't have the buttons on here, otherwise this would be fitting. It's pulling back because this type of waistband is a hemmed waistband, so it keeps it nice and solid, but it does fit around the waist. It's just right now you can't tell that. When you're ribbing from the bottom up, when you get the ribbing done, using either a longer circular or a piece of yarn, put the ribbing onto that and then fit it around your waist to make sure it is actually fitting. That is another tip for fitting. And I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Oh, sleeve check. As you're knitting the sleeve, you know, another sleeve check, you're gonna wanna like make sure it's gonna be long enough. I have really long limbs, a very short trunk, so for me, most patterns, the sleeves are slightly too short. So again, I had to add a bit of length to the actual sleeve to make sure it was gonna be, because I wanted it to be like come down to here, right? So yeah, I think those are some of the basic fitting things you're always gonna do. Like, constantly try it on. I'm telling you, you will thank yourself later. And then, okay, so let me just quickly go through different styles of knit garments. So we have bottom up, seamless. This is not completely seamless. If it was completely seamless, the sleeve would be, you would pick up the stitches from here and then knit down. Some seamless knit in the round patterns or knit on circulars, you still have to pick up and knit the button band on. I do want to make this pattern again, and when I do, not only I'm going to do that, you know, make sure that it is picked up and knit down, I'm going to figure out how to add the button band into the actual pattern piece so that I'm not having to do that separately later. So a few other different types of knitting is it's called seamed, meaning that you knit several of the pieces. So you would knit the two front panels, you would knit the arm, and then you would knit the back all separate, and then you would seam it up afterwards. You're probably not going to see the seam, but you would then seam it up afterwards. Another handy reason to have a whole bunch of these. Because I'm telling you, I actually piece my garments together. That's another thing. If you're doing individual pieces that you're going to seam up later, you can use these to do fit checks by just clipping the pieces together and putting it on your body. And also when I'm seaming it up, I hold the garment together with this. I have tried pins. They fall out. Even big pins fall out. I do use this for holding my garment together so I can sew it up. So this is a 1950s, as well as being a cardigan. This is a 1950s dolman sleeved garment. And what you do is you start out at one end, and then this is 3 pieces. Yeah, this is 3. Yeah, this is 3 pieces because the sleeve is knit on. And what you do is you start here and you rib, and then you increase your stitches so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually you increase your stitches this way. So that is dolman. Okay, I'm just going to have to put these on the floor. This is a 1940s bolero done with it's a pretty easy stitch. It is literally sections of ribbing and knit. So there's like a section of ribbing and then a section of knit. Again, this is a seamed short sleeve, set-in sleeve. In this case, this has a pleat at the top in order to give it that 1940s puff. So Dolman is one style of sleeve. This is another one. This is just a basic set-in sleeve, bolero. Oh, by the way, I'm also wearing spring colors today because I am so over winter. It's only February. It went from being really warm to really freaking cold to being slightly warm to really freaking cold again. I have put spring colors on in hope that it warms up and no more minus 20 wind chills because I'm not built for that. Honestly, I should have been born somewhere where it's like consistently warm. Okay, this is a Tasha Could Knit That pattern. This is a top down, knit in the round, seamless sweater. And in this case, the only thing that you knit, well, you don't knit it separately. So here you pick up the stitches for the neck, and for the sleeves, you pick up the stitches around and then you knit out. And this is a 3/4 sleeve. My preference used to be seamed because I felt that I could do the fit better on those. I'm really loving top down, even bottom up, but top down seamless in the round sweaters. So using a similar technique, this is a cardigan. This is a top down seamless, but a cardigan. And this is an Andy Sutherland pattern, which unfortunately she doesn't have online anymore. It actually breaks my heart, but none of her patterns are online anymore. Hers is top down seamless. Again, the pick up, knit out, pick up, knit up for the collar. This is using circular needles because it is let me just hold this out very wide because it's seamless. That is how big the bottom is. So you need very long circular needles for this. Well, not very long, but you need long circular needles for this. It's also worsted. Actually, I think these are, no, the Tasha is, the Tasha and the first cardigan, the blue one I showed you, are DK. The rest are, nope, the first one I showed you is DK. The second one, the 1940s Bolero, is bulky, and then, yeah. So my card got full. I had to go free up some space on it. It gave me an opportunity to pick up the knits that I put on the floor. I just want to show you so you understand more what I just said. So these two, this is the Tasha Can Make That, and this is the vintage 1950s pattern from Subversive Femme. These are both knit in a DK yarn. This was knit required a bulky yarn. In my case, I couldn't find a color I liked. So what I did instead was I held 2 strands of worsted wool together, and that created the proper gauge for a bulky knit. And then this was knit in worsted, I would say medium worsted. And this final sweater is a seamed sweater with a yoke that is knit seamless. So what I mean by that is you would knit the two front pieces, the back and the sleeves individually. Then you would seam them up. Then where the flowers are, that's where the yoke starts. The flowers here. You would knit up from there. So to do that, you would go around starting here all the way around, and you would pick up stitches, and then you would knit the yoke piece by you're gonna reduce stitches all the way up to the neckline. And this particular yoke is sort of a variation on a rib. There are a variety of other ways to do yoke. You could knit the yoke first, put it on hold somewhere, like with stitches or yarn, and then you would knit the other pieces, and then you would sew the yoke to the actual pieces. Or the entire garment could be knit from the yoke and then, knit out in sort of a knit on sleeve kind of thing, and then you would separate the pieces and then knit the front and the back. There's a variety of ways that you would do a yoke garment. Okay, so that is it for the knits. The different styles, slightly different ways to do it. Now we're going to move on to the quick little tutorials, and again, it's going to be casting on, casting off, how to do regular just knit stitch, how to do stockinette, which stockinette is knit on the front, purl on the back. So I'm going to show you how to do those. I'm also going to show you how to increase and decrease stitches. So yeah, I think that was it. So they're just basic things you need when you begin knitting. So those are coming up right now. Okay, so here are the tutorials. The first one I'm going to do is called I'm doing cast-ons first. I'm only going to show you two, and these are going to be the two ones that you're going to see a lot in patterns. I apologize for the shadows. I'm trying to get the lighting so there isn't shadows, but I don't think I'm going to be able to completely avoid it right here. So the first tutorial is going to be what's called a long tail cast on. And what you do is you measure out a length of a tail for the garment you're knitting. And I'm not going to do garment length for this, but if it's for 100 stitches to start your waist, what I do is I will take my needle, leave a bit of a tail, and I will wrap my yarn around that needle however many stitches the ribbing or whatever is going to be. So say it's 100, you would do this 100 times, and that's going to generally give you the amount of yarn you're going to need. In this case, I'm just going to do this much. And then what you do is once you have your length of yarn, you're going to make a noose basically. You can see that okay? And then what you're doing, you know how to make a noose. So just make a noose, because what you want is you want the yarn to be able to like pull up to a smaller bit. Like that. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to come from this angle, the right side needle into the hole, and you're going to pull it up tight. You're going to grab the yarn with these two fingers, like this. Take these, your thumb and your first finger, and go in between and create a diamond. And then turn your hand like this. Come under the first, up through. Grab the stitch from underneath on your forefinger. Turn this and come back through. And then pull that tight. Again, let me show you again. You got your hand, you're going to take these two fingers, twist your hand like this, grab the yarn, let me make sure that's in front. I always make sure the short piece is in front. Let's try that again. Grab your forefinger and your thumb in between to create a diamond. Then take the needle, twist your hand like this, come down, in front, under, and back out so that the yarn closest to you is now on top of that right needle. Twist your arm like this. Come under the front of the yarn on your forefinger, and then back through the loop. Diamond, right needle down and under that thread. Twist your hand. You'll get a rhythm. Do that yarn. Let's do it again. Okay, got your diamond. Your hand is twisted that way. Down, under, up. Pull that yarn through. Right? Turn under, grab this yarn, pull it through. I'm going to try to do it even slower this time. Your hand is like this. Down, under, through, grab the yarn on your forefinger, so it's like this, through the hoop, and pull. So hopefully that makes sense. And that's called a long tail cast on. Okay, so for the next cast on, which you see quite a bit actually, it's more common than the long tail. You're still gonna make a noose. This time it's gonna be on the left hand needle. And it doesn't matter how long, well, I mean, leave enough of a tail that you can weave this into your work afterwards. Then you're gonna take the right hand needle and you're gonna go into that stitch. I'm just going to grab onto my loose tail there. You're going to grab that stitch and you're going to come around. So this is your right hand needle, okay? You're going to come around and behind that right hand needle and pull it through the first stitch and pop that onto your left hand needle. Hopefully you can see this okay. So you're going to go into the front of the stitch that's currently on the left hand needle, come through it. So the right hand needle is on top of that needle. You're going to wrap the stitch, it's kind of hard to see with my hand going over, but you're going to wrap the stitch around that right hand needle and then pull that yarn out and pop it onto the left hand needle. Again, in the front of the stitch, push your right hand needle through, wrap the yarn under and around the right hand needle so it's at the back of the right hand needle, slide your needle catching that yarn and pulling it out and popping it onto the left hand needle. Let's do one more. Coming through that loop from the front. I know some people do it from the back, which is fine. I do it from the front myself. Right needle through that loop, coming from underneath, wrap the yarn under, behind, and pull it up, and then pull out the yarn, and then put it on the thread, the left needle. So that is just like a standard everyday cast on. Okay, so now that I have shown you how to cast on, we're going to do the knit stitch. I use the long tail method to cast on for this particularly. I have done a little bit already because I wanted to show you what the texture looks like. And the front and the back look the same. Anyone that's just learning how to knit right now, like anything, it's just practice. So I'm using a heavier worsted yarn, as well as a heavier worsted yarn as well as 4mm. In the intro, couldn't remember the style of knitting that she taught me. I mean, we call it the Grandma Betty method, but it is actually English style knitting, and in English style knitting, you throw the yarn. And I do know that, so how she taught me how to do the knit stitch was you come in from behind. Another method to do a knit stitch is to come in from the front. Like this, but that's not how I learned. So do whichever of those two ways is more comfortable. Okay, so let's get started. So literally the knit stitch is, you're doing this for all the rows. Okay, so you're coming in either from the front or from behind, whichever is comfortable for you. Let's slow this down a bit. So you're either going in front or behind, in my case behind, throwing the yarn over the right hand needle and pulling through. So you're knitting into the first stitch on the left hand needle, throwing the yarn around if you're doing English style knitting, and then pulling it off. So wrap the yarn around, pull it under and through the first loop on the left, and then pull it off. Put the needle in the loop on the left hand needle, wrap your yarn around, then grab that yarn that's on the right hand needle and pull it through, and pull the stitch on the left hand needle off. Put your needle in through the loop on the left hand, wrap the yarn around, pull that yarn through with the right hand needle, and pull that stitch on the left hand needle off. Okay, that is the, let's do 2 rows. So that's row 1. Okay, and this is row 2. And for row 2, you're literally going to do the exact same thing. You are going to just do that knit stitch. And that is why the front and the back look exactly the same. In this next section, I'm technically going to be teaching you 2 different stitches. The stockinette stitch, which is what this ends up being, and the purl stitch. So to do the stockinette stitch, you need to do a knit stitch on the front, purl on the back. Or, well, it depends what you're knitting. Sometimes a pattern will actually require you to have the purl on the front, but more than likely this stitch is going to be on the front. So to get this stitch, I apologize for all the noise of my needle. The front you're going to do, and we just showed it, I just showed it to you, the knit stitch. Just grab some yarn here. So you're going to do the knit stitch. I'm going to do this a little quick. If you need to review it, it'll be the stitch right before this one in the video. Okay, I'm just going to do a section here. And again, I'm using English style knitting. Okay, so there is a bunch of knit stitches. So what you're going to do, I'm just going to turn it here as opposed to finishing the row. you're going to do, and see the difference in the texture? This is called purl, and how I was taught to purl was to come in through the front. Now, other people come in from the back this way to do their purl stitch. I'm going to continue using the one that I was taught by my grandma. So it's coming in the front of the needle. And then, so you're going to take your right needle into the front of the loop that's on the left needle. I'm going to wrap that yarn around that needle so it's underneath. Then you're going to pull the right needle under the left needle, grabbing the yarn that you just threw over, which is this, and then you're going to pull it off. All right, you're going to wrap the needle, and you're going to pull it through, and you're going to pull that stitch off. You're going to go in front of the left needle, wrap your yarn, the right needle, grab that yarn that you just wrapped around, pull it off. See? Wrap the yarn, grab it as you're pulling the needle through, pull it off. Let's do it a few more times here. I'm going to try to slow it down. I don't know if you're going to see this or not. Okay. And then when you come around to the other side, oops, untangle my yarn here. When you come around to the other side, you're going to do the knit stitch again, and then purl, and then knit, and then purl, and then knit. So while we're here, I just wanted to show you, if you are knitting and you realize somewhere down here, uh-oh, I did a purl instead of a knit, or I screwed up a stitch, you can actually drop a stitch down and then using a crochet hook, pick that stitch back up. Now, these are 4mm needles. I always make sure that the needle, the crochet hook that I'm using is also the same. So this is also 4mm crochet hook. Now, to fix that stitch, you're not knitting across, okay? Well, you can if you want, but I would just move the needles over to a right-hand needle so you get to the row where that stitch is an issue. Drop the stitch off and then count how many stitches you come down. And I usually use the opposite end of the crochet hook, the blunt end, I guess, and I just pull the stitches out of the loop until I get down to the stitch I want to fix. See? Now, because it's the front and the knit stitch, you're going to pull that loop, the last loop, to the front. You're going to keep the stitches you just pulled out, the yarn you just pulled out, to the back. You're going to put your crochet hook in, into the loop in the front of your work. Then you're going to grab the first closest yarn, and then you're going to come up underneath it, have the yarn sitting on top grabbing the hook, and pull it back through that hoop. Let's do that again. So you're going to take the crochet hook, go under the yarn that is loose behind, you just pulled this out, right? Bring it to the front, have the hook part on top, let it grab into the hook, pull it back through the loop. And the reason I'm saying it doing this way is that you're not going to twist your stitches. You're going to still have that consistent knit stitch in the front. Okay, again, so you're going to, oh, and my needle, my stitches just fell off my needle. I'm just going to leave them for now. You're going to grab that yarn, pull it through the hoop. Oops. Also, sometimes you have to be careful to make sure it comes completely through, which this is not for some reason. And as you get back up towards the top, it might get a little tighter. Oh. There we go. And pull it through. And then go up to the next one and pull it through. And then put that back. Oh, I'm pulling stitches out on the other side. Onto your needle. Unfortunately, my yarn is unwrapping a bit, but okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is how to do a decrease, and this is just a basic decrease. There are several different ways to decrease stitches, and these are going to be how to decrease on the end. So here we have our stockinette stitch, and this is also called, this particular stitch is called knit two together, which you might see as K, the letter or the number 2, TOG. So you're going to take 2 stitches on the end. Now, depending on the pattern, it could say knit 1, then knit 2 together. It could say knit 3, knit 2 together. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to do it on the end. So start at the end. I'm just going to show you a few across, but so to decrease, you're going to take the last 2 stitches and you're going to put your right needle through both of those stitches. So there are 2 of them together here. And then you're going to knit it like you would knit a regular stitch. And then pull both those stitches off. Now, if you're, as an example, doing an armhole and you need to do the decreases for the armhole, and say you have to do 5 or 6 decreases to get the armhole started, to do a continuous decrease, you're going to put the right hand needle loop back on the left hand needle, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to take 2 stitches, put the right needle into them, and knit 2 together. You're going to put that stitch back on. You're going to take those 2 stitches and knit them as one. And then you're going to see what that looks like. And that's decreases. Okay, so for increases, I'm going to start on the end here. You're going to, as if you're doing a knit stitch, you're going to wrap the yarn around, pull it through, but don't pull that stitch off the left hand needle, and then you're going to knit into the front of that stitch, wrap the yarn, and then you can pull off. And now you've got 2 stitches. Let's do that again. You're going to do the motion as if you're knitting the stitch, but not pull it off. Put the needle in through the front and back in through that loop again that's still on that needle. Do another knit and then pull it off. And one more time. Knit as if you're going to actually knit the stitch. Not pull it off, do not pull it off. Come back through the front of the loop. And then knit that stitch, and then you can pull it off. And then that is, you've now got 2 stitches knit into 1 stitch. And that's your increases, a very basic increase. Okay, so the next stitch I'm going to teach you is called ribbing. There are multiple ways to rib. You can do a 1-on-1 or 1-by-1, a 2-by-2, a 3-by-3, etc. A lot of garments start with ribbing, also sleeves have ribbing, and necklines usually have ribbing. So this, I am doing a 2-by-2. And what you're doing for a 2-by-2 is you're going to knit 2 stitches. It's very, very easy. Purl 2 stitches. Knit 2 stitches. Purl 2 stitches. That is basic ribbing. Like very, very basic. Knit, purl, knit, purl. Or you're going to do knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, or you're going to do knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, you know, depending on what the pattern calls for. But that is basically ribbing. It's very, very simple. And what ribbing also does is it keeps your garment from rolling up. So it stabilizes the hem of a garment. Okay, those are all the stitches. I hope you found this useful. And I'm back. I hope you found the basic knitting tutorial helpful. There is going to be a future, and not too far off in the future, video where I am going to do a little knit along with you. It'll be a very easy, very simple pattern. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It will be a surprise. However, you will need worsted yarn. That is all the information I'm going to give you on that. And we are going to, well, the other bit of information is we're going to be using all of the basic stitches and techniques I just showed you in those tutorials. So practice those, and the next video after this one, which will be in a couple of weeks because I am back to every other week now. I'm going back and forth between YouTube and Patreon, so for now, it will not be weekly. It will be back to the every other week. So the next video after this, which is not this Friday, coming Friday, but the following, will be the knit along. But don't worry. All you're going to need is worsted wool and I believe 4mm knitting needles. But prior to, I will do a post telling you what materials you're going to need in order for the knit along. So, until then, stay kitschy.